Hey everyone, welcome to the Royce Reports. I'm your host Royce, and today we're talking about quite a few topics today. So we're going to start off talking about a potential Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 mid-gen refresh. Then we're going to dive into the 30 frames per second debate that's been going on recently because of Gotham Knights, and maybe potentially that the reason why it's 30 frames per second on all consoles is because of the Xbox Series S. Also, some updates for other games that are potentially going to be 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. And to top it all off, we also have Fallout New Vegas 2 rumors. So with all that, let's just get into the news. So starting off, the mid-gen refresh that is rumored to be happening for both the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5. So this is a rumor that was been circulating Reddit, and let's just see what they have to say. Mid-gen upgrades for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X dev kits have been received by most AAA studios, according to Tez2. Tez2, who is known to be a data miner and insider for mostly Rockstar games, stated on GTA forums most AAA studios have received the dev kits of midlife upgrades or should receive them by the start of the new year. No info on when these mid-gen upgrades for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X are going to be released, but he says he is for sure confident about this information and not speculation. So this is a rumor, of course, so it is to be taken with a grain of salt. I don't know how reliable this leaker is. So it's, he could be onto something here, and that because he does know a lot about Rockstar games and he knows that they could potentially have these dev kits, which is very interesting to me because of where we are at in this life cycle of this next gen console war right now. We're 2 years into the life cycle of these consoles, and we are still not getting games that are dedicated solely to Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. Except for a handful of games here and there, with Starfield being the big next game coming up that's going to be exclusive to the Series X, and the PlayStation 5 not really having a window of when they are going to stop supporting the PlayStation. In fact, there's been recent rumors of them continuing to produce and continuing to breathe life into the PlayStation 4 before moving on to the PlayStation 5. So I kind of get where they're coming from because of the fact that the PlayStation's player base has 117 million install users, that of course they don't want to lose all of those users. You're going from that to the PlayStation 5, which is currently around 20 to 25 million users. You're going to be losing a lot of potential buyers because of that. And because of the fact that a lot of people still can't get their hands on a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, this generation has started off really slow in comparison to previous generations. Now, they have sold a lot more. It's just a weird thing because they have sold a lot more where they're at now in their life cycles than they had in the previous generation, but they're still not supporting it in the way that you would have expected, because even though that people still call this next gen, this is the current generation right now. Wild that we still haven't gotten current generation exclusive titles, and we're still kind of living in the past with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. So this is kind of hard to hear that 2 years into the life cycle that they're going to potentially have a refresh when they haven't really even flexed what these consoles are capable of. And so yeah, we're going to be getting that. So a lot of people are saying like this is to be expected because they do this all the time. They do not do this all the time. The only time they've ever done this was with the previous generation. Because of the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro, they did that because of how weak the Xbox One was, and in comparison to PlayStation 4 as well. I mean, it was more powerful than the Xbox One, but both of these consoles launched in kind of a state where they were not that powerful. With the Series X and the PlayStation 5, on the other hand, this is a different story. They are very powerful, they are very strong consoles, but they haven't had the chance to really show what they're capable of. So yeah, they have done it before, but this is not the norm. You have different SKUs, of course, like during the 360 version, during the 360 days, during the PlayStation 3 days, you had the PlayStation 3 Fat, you had the Slim, you had the Xbox 360 with the red ring, and they had to fix that, so they ended up coming out with a different SKU with the Xbox 360S and the Xbox 360E. So of course they've done different SKUs, but they didn't change the power of the consoles. And as we're going into the future, of course they're gonna, you know, come out with a way to cut costs on developing these games. They're gonna cut costs on the heat sink and what it takes for SSDs as they become cheaper. The material becomes cheaper. So they find ways to make it to where they can get more money out of the box instead of either breaking even or losing money on these things. So of course there's going to be redesigns and different SKUs in the future. That is always the case. That will always be the case because they want to continue to try to cut costs where they can. But a brand new SKU, a brand new design and power is kind of really a kind of a shitty thing, because now you're having developers who are having to make all these different consoles for the different SKUs that they have available right now with the Xbox Series S, the Xbox Series X, as well as the PlayStation 5. And now you're going to throw in on top of all that, okay, now you're going to have to make a game and have it designed in order to take into account for the new SKUs being the PlayStation 5 Pro and the Xbox Series X Pro. It's kind of shitty for developers, especially since they haven't really had enough time to develop on the previous SKUs that they currently have out right now. So I don't really know how true this is. I don't think it's very necessary, especially because of the way that gaming is right now. It is really hard to get your hands on both of these consoles. I went into the store today, and every time I walk into Target, every time I walk into a Walmart, I always make it a point to go check the gaming aisle to see if there's any Xbox Series X's or PlayStation 5 available at these locations, and I have never seen one out in the wild. I have seen the Xbox Series S, but those are always easier to get your hands on because they're able to make more and produce more than they can with the other two. But it's not just the fact that you've had a hard time getting these consoles because of supply constraints, but also because COVID was such a huge thing, and it prevented a lot of people from being able to go and get one and go to the store and find one. And because it affected the industry as a whole, where it caused a lot of people to shift and work from home, and it kind of put everything to a halt. And now you have inflation the way it is, and because of how inflation is affecting not just here in America but everywhere around the world, a lot of people kind of have to focus on the priorities right now. And gaming, it might not be their number one priority. Gaming at its core is a luxury. It is a luxury to be able to even have one console. I'm sort of at a standstill with this. I'm on the fence. Like, am I excited to see what these potential mid-gen refreshes are capable of? Yeah, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, well, we haven't really got to see what the Series X and the PlayStation 5 are capable of. So we'll see. We'll see if it's true or not. So with that, let's move on to the next topic, which is Gotham Knights is coming out as being 30 frames per second. And this is what a developer on the game had to say. This comes from Fleur. I am not even going to try to pronounce that name. Marty. Fleur Marty. So, hello at everyone. I know many of you are wondering about the availability of a performance mode for Gotham Knights on consoles. Due to the types of features we have in our game, like providing a fully untethered co-op experience in our highly detailed open world, it's not as straightforward as lowering the resolution and getting a higher FPS. For this reason, our game does not have a performance/quality toggle option and will run at 30 frames per second on console. Alright. So, Gotham Knights, 30 frames per second. Now, it's so hard to even describe how shitty this is. Like, I don't like hearing this. This is not good news, right? This isn't news that is really befitting for these new consoles that are supposed to be able to do 60 frames per second and 4K. And I know that obviously they're not as powerful as a PC. They never will be. But that expectation going into this new console generation wasn't about how the games look. It was about how the games are going to feel. Because in previous generations, of course, you had games run at 60 frames per second, but that was far and few between. And 30 frames per second was the norm. But now the new norm is 60 frames per second. And I'm not like a frame rate snob. I can play games at 30 frames per second just fine. It doesn't bother me. But at the same time, when you tout that these consoles are capable of 4K 60, and when you have a game that looks like Gotham Knights not capable of running at 60 frames per second, then it kind of looks bad. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because you look at a game like Batman Arkham Knight, which came out in 2015, and that game, even though it ran at 30 frames per second, was a game that looked phenomenal. It looked amazing. The way the neon lights are, the way the world is, how bustling it is, and how the lights reflect off of the bat suit, and how it's just raining and having so much reflections going on, as well as it just being a really dense world with a lot of content in it. And despite of how you might feel about the story, the gameplay was solid, as it always was. Rocksteady knows how to make those Batman Arkham games, and a lot of work went into that, and it was able to run on the Xbox One. And that is the craziest part about it, is that the Xbox One was the weakest console last generation, and you're able to run Batman Arkham Knight on there. And that by itself is a feat that I don't know how Rocksteady was able to do, but they're able to achieve that. And when you look at the Gotham Knight gameplay compared to the Arkham Knight, there's a night and day difference here. Gotham Knights, I'm not gonna say it looks bad or it looks shitty, but it looks bad and it looks shitty. They could have done a lot more. And when you look at Gotham Knights, which came out in 2015, and you compare it to a 2022 Gotham Knights game, it's kind of embarrassing. And I just don't understand how having untethered co-op is really gonna change that, because you have Halo Infinite, which, I mean, co-op isn't really out right now, but their co-op experience, from what people have been able to play, is still 60 frames per second, and it doesn't need to be untethered. There is a distance set between you and your co-op partner, but I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't really need. I don't need to have my co-op friend going across the city and doing some other stuff. I don't want that happening. I want my friend near me. That's the whole point of playing co-op. You go and do things. Yeah, you might be like, hey man, go take care of this mission, I'm gonna go do this. But this isn't like a survival game. It's an action adventure. You're supposed to be tackling missions together. That's the whole point. That's why you're doing this. So, and the fact is that the co-op is also not even 4 players. You have 4 characters you can choose from, but you can only play 2-player co-op. So don't act like this is extremely demanding. Don't act like you can't place it at you can't place it at 60 frames per second, and that the only way to keep it that way is because you want to keep it untethered, and that this world is so dense, when every single thing that we've seen about Gotham Knights has been so poorly received, because the story looks bland, the characters don't look fun, the fight style, the combat looks very slow, and it doesn't look like you feel like you're doing any damage. And I know it might be different when I get it in my hands, but this is not what the Arkham universe is known for. This is not how it's supposed to be. And I know it's not the Arkham universe, but this is the team behind Arkham Origins, and Arkham Origins, in my opinion, is a very underrated game, and they did a great job with that. But come on, you can't be serious. So a lot of people are upset, and understandably so. And another thing I want to talk about before leading into something else is the fact that this is coming out now. They didn't tell us a year ago. They didn't tell us a few months ago. They're telling us a week before the game comes out. A week. That shows that if it wasn't for people going them and giving out their review copies so that way people could play this ahead of time, that they wouldn't have never have told us in the first place. It would have just been something that they would have swept under the rug. And that is such a shitty practice, to lie or to hide the truth from customers. This is something that should have been disclosed at the get. They should have been like, hey, we are trying to go to 30 frames per second for a artistic reason because we want this to be achievable. That's what you should have done earlier on, not a week before the game has come out, not before everyone's pre-ordered this under the assumption that this is going to be 60 frames per second, at least, not 4K 60, at least a 60 frames per second option, because other games that are more demanding like Cyberpunk are able to do that. And Cyberpunk runs at 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series S. So how is that this game isn't capable of that? And I don't want to act like I'm an armchair developer because I have no idea what goes into developing, but from seeing it and comparing it to other games that do run on the Series S at 60 frames per second, it's kind of hard to hear your reasoning and then accept it as fact. But let's get into the controversial aspect of this, which is from Lee DeVonald. So this guy, I don't have the original post. I can't find it anywhere. He also deleted his Twitter because of probably a lot of the feedback that he's been getting about all of this stuff. Well, but from what I can remember and pull it from my brain like fucking Dumbledore from Harry Potter,
You must be anxious enough as it is, knowing what lies ahead. And again, we all are.
Is that he pretty much said that this news came out and then he works at Rocksteady. He's a developer for Rocksteady, but he came out and he said that the reason why that this game is running at 30 frames per second is because of the Xbox Series S. That is what he essentially said in a nutshell. And so he said that the Xbox Series S is not true next gen, that is barely more powerful than the Xbox One, and thus developers, they tried to work on the lowest platform available and try to make it accessible on there and then work up from there. But because of the Xbox Series S, his reasoning for them not achieving 60 frames per second on Gotham Knights is because of that and nothing else. And so someone else commented on that post that he originally had, and they said, I mean, the Series X is much more powerful than the Xbox One, but yeah, ... And then Lee responded to that saying, the Series S exists though, and Microsoft won't let you launch on one without the other, and entire generation of games hamstrung by that potato. So he's pretty much saying that Microsoft won't let you play a game, won't let you launch a game without launching it on the Series S, which makes sense to me. So the Series S is probably the best selling Xbox console right now at the moment, and it's because people are able to get their hands on it and because it's considered next gen at a cheaper price. So because he's saying that because the Series S exists, that they force game developers to place their game on the Series S if they're going to want to sell it on the Series X, that therefore all these games are going to be stuck at 30 frames per second because of that potato, which is completely and truly bullshit. That is 100% bullshit. Yeah, of course, if you're going to launch a game like Gotham Knights, you want to launch it on the Series S as well as the Series X. But that doesn't mean that the performance on the Series S has to match what the Series X is outputting. In fact, that is the complete opposite of the whole reason that they have two different SKUs. They have the Series X, which is a more powerful console and capable of having higher frame rates and a higher resolution over the Series S for a reason, because they want the people who are considered more hardcore gamers to buy that version of the Xbox so that way they can achieve those things. And the Series S is a lower priced option, but because it's a lower priced option, it has a lower power output. And That's the whole point, is to get people into the ecosystem with that. So yeah, if you're gonna release a game, they want you to release it on that, as well as the Series X. They don't expect you to have both run at 30 frames per second or both run at 60 frames per second. They understand. They understand that. So him saying that is just completely an asinine thing to say. But this guy has a history of just trash talking the Series S. He really hates the Series S a whole lot. Yeah, so he said things like, oh, and I'm fairly sure the only way to get the Xbox Series S to run at 60 anything, let alone FPS, is to roll that potato down the steepest hill you can find. The Series S has done more damage to current gen than anything else. Fuck this meme and fuck the Xbox Series S in particular. He says a lot about just shit talking the Series S. But then after him getting a lot of feedback, a lot of people pretty much calling him out, saying that he's like doesn't know what he's talking about, he came out and said this. I really should have prefaced this with, I don't work for Warner Brothers Montreal. I don't work on or have ever worked on Gotham Knights. I have no idea why they've made the choices they've made. I've worked in game dev for over a decade, and I'm hoping to help people see it's never simple. No one is saying that developing a game is simple. That's why developing a game takes years and years and years. No one is saying that. And the fact that he comes out and he's just shit talking the Xbox Series S because of how underpowered it is compared to the Series X and the PlayStation 5 shows that you are out of touch with a lot of things. Like I was saying earlier, gaming is a luxury. Not everybody can afford an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. So if they want to do something that they're passionate about or want to get into gaming, then they could get the Series S and get something like Game Pass and have access to all those games, because that's the only way they can get into that system. And the fact that you're saying that these games should be held off from that console because it should be only for the elite shows me that you don't know what you're talking about and that you're privileged and are an asshole. That it's that simple. They should be able to place that game on the Series S and the Series X, and the Series X should perform better than the Series S. End of discussion. That's it. All you have to do is just spend extra time to optimize your game for that specific console, and then spend the other time optimizing it for the other consoles. There you go. And people keep making excuses of, hey, developers don't have all the time or all the money to do this. Well, this developer does have all those things. It is backed by Warner Brothers Montreal. Warner Brothers, Comcast, one of the best selling businesses out there right now. They have buku bucks. They have things like Batman, Superman, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter. They have access to all of these IP. They are a huge gargantuan company. They have money. They can take the time to develop a specific console port for the Xbox Series S. But the reason why they're doing this is because they don't want to push it again. They want to get it out and they want to sell it before the holidays. That is the only reason why they're pushing so hard. And the fact that this guy is just defending, he's such an Xbox Series S hater, is really sad. That his whole pretty much Twitter was dedicated to it. Now, he deleted his Twitter account because of the feedback he's been giving, and I don't think that anyone should have said anything harmful or wished any malintent towards this guy, because obviously he is passionate about gaming. He is in the gaming industry, but he is obviously kind of out of touch when it comes to the Xbox Series S and gamers in general. So with that, we'll move on to other topics about 30 frames per second. And it was rumored that Plague Tale Requiem, which is launching on the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X and S, as well as PC and Switch, is all going to be running at 30 frames per second on all consoles, well, despite PC. That was the rumor because of a tweet that came out from a Spanish Twitter account, pretty much saying that there was no options to choose anything other than 30 frames per second. Now, I don't know if it was because they didn't have the day one patch or what it was, but they pretty much have an article from Twisted Voxel saying that a Plague Tale Requiem frame rate targets 60 frames per second on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Now, in their report, they don't really talk about a specific source that they received this from, other than citing, they don't have a source at all stating whether or not this came from a certain person. But if you go to Reset Era also has a thread, and on that thread, people who have access to the game early have stated that the game does run at 60 frames per second. It is not a locked 60 frames per second. It is definitely variable. It does drop below 60 frames per second. But if you have a VRR television, then or monitor, this will be fine, since VRR will be able to kind of counteract that. But it seems to be in kind of answered, kind of, not really. No official statement has really come out, but we'll see when it gets here. I guess it's supposed to be coming out tomorrow. That's interesting. Comes out tomorrow, so a lot of people are gonna be diving into that. I am probably gonna be diving into it because I love the first one, and I think the first one was really underrated, and I'm super stoked to see what they have to offer with this one. But more rumors and speculation on frame rates, because that seems to be the talk of the town right now for this past week, is Pentiment will run at 60 frames per second on all consoles, which is no shock there, because doesn't look like a very demanding game. But it should have probably ran at 120 frames per second, and the reason why is probably because of the Xbox Series S. I'm just kidding, but yeah, so 60 frames per second on the Xbox One, the Xbox Series S, the Xbox Series X. So that's cool to know. I am stoked because Obsidian has always proves me wrong. I always go into their games expecting not to like them, but come out loving them. So this goes for Grounded, this goes for South Park, and hopefully with Pentiment it is the same. So going in there with low expectations, as I always do for some reason with Obsidian, but I'm probably going to be blown away by what they have to offer. Speaking of Obsidian, since we're already on the topic, let's talk about Fallout New Vegas 2. Now, Fallout New Vegas 2, it's not necessarily a New Vegas 2, but they did a recent interview over on DualShockers, which is a PlayStation website. So that's kind of weird. They're owned by Xbox, but they did an interview, and this is what the co-founder of Obsidian had to say about Fallout. So this quote comes from Obsidian co-founder Fergus. I'm really bad with last names. Urquhart. And they asked him if they had the opportunity to work on a new Fallout game, would they? Urquhart responded assertively, "Of course, if we ever got the opportunity to make another Fallout game, we'd make it. There's not even a question of whether or not we would do it. It's just, will the opportunity arise?" He said. "I hung around at Interplay for probably an extra year because I wanted to work on Fallout more. I love Fallout." Obsidian, obviously this is awesome news. This is great news. But at the moment, Obsidian is really busy with a lot of projects. They just released the full version of Grounded a couple of weeks ago. They have a game coming up with Pentiment. They're also currently working on their next AAA game, being Avowed, which hasn't really gotten a lot of news about it lately. And they announced the Outer Worlds 2 sequel. So they are really, really a busy studio. Now, maybe after all this dust is settled, maybe they can hop into the Fallout universe. But I also kind of feel like Bethesda is very, very cautious about its IP. And it doesn't really hand out IP to other people at all, except for New Vegas, which was what they did with Obsidian. But because of the behind the scenes going on between Bethesda and Obsidian, and of how Fallout New Vegas performed both critically and commercially, there is some bad blood there. So ever since then, Bethesda really hasn't handed their IP to anybody else, and have instead wanted to kind of shepherd their own IP and just keep it in-house. And so, of course, now that Obsidian and Bethesda are under the same roof of Microsoft, maybe they can somehow work together or have the hands that be up above in Microsoft pretty much force them to let go of the Fallout franchise because of how far away Fallout is in the release cycle of Bethesda, because currently Bethesda is obviously working on Starfield, and I imagine Starfield is going to be a huge hit. And if it is a big hit and they decide to do DLC and post content launch, post launch content, that they're going to be having their hands full with that. And then they also said that after they're done with Starfield, that they are immediately going to dive into the Elder Scrolls, which is probably going to take another 4 to 8 years to finish that. And so where does that leave Fallout? And that's the big question. This is something that is a huge IP. In fact, could possibly be even bigger than Elder Scrolls. And this is something that I feel like needs to be made. They can't just leave this idle for too long. And with the work that Obsidian did with New Vegas, and obviously the amount of love and respect that these guys have for that Fallout universe, it's unparalleled. This is something that you should be able to hand over to these guys and get them to work on it, because they will release a great product. And so I hope that they are able to do that with this. But there's still some stuff left in this interview, so we'll talk about that. The studio is extremely busy, but once the current schedule clears up, then Urquhart said it will look at what it can do next. At some point, we'll start looking into what those next games are going to be, and I would be surprised if Fallout is not on that list, he told us. If we were to do Fallout, it has to tie in with what Bethesda is doing with Fallout and a lot of other things. But I would always personally say my hope is that before I ride off into the sunset, I'd love to make another Fallout game. But yeah, the love for Fallout is obviously there, and like this guy has said, he wants to do another one, and before he leaves the company, he hopes that dream can come true. And I as well hope that dream can come true, because in my opinion, Fallout New Vegas is the best Fallout. And the fact is, right now you can even play on Game Pass, and if you have an Xbox Series X, you can experience that at 60 frames per second, which is pretty awesome. I have gone back and played it, and I absolutely love it. It is such a fun world to be in, and I am just hoping that Bethesda and Microsoft and Obsidian all work together to be able to output this great franchise once more, and not have to wait for Fallout 5, which is super far away from us at the moment. And these guys aren't getting any younger. So I'm also not getting any younger. So please come out with another Fallout game. I love Fallout. And with that, that's all I have for today. I appreciate all of you guys for stopping by. I appreciate you for checking out my channel. But if you like what you saw and you'd like to see more, then please think about subscribing. And I just really do hope that you guys continue to watch my content, and I appreciate all of you. And the next thing that I have coming up is probably Grounded, the review for that. I have finally finished it. This was a game that I did not expect to be spending a lot of time in, but it kind of took me away from all the other projects that I wanted to do. And so I can't wait to show my experience with this and tell you guys what I think about Grounded. So like I said, if you are interested in that, then stay tuned, and have a good one out there, and stay safe. And remember, take it easy.